This is Will Bakker for Theology in Pop Culture Video Journal Week number 9. And for this one, I watched yesterday, which is a recent film kind of with a really interesting premise, which is basically that a struggling singer-songwriter named Jack Malik is riding his bike home one night when he gets hit by a bus. And there's a major power outage that's all around the world. And when he wakes up, he's recovering, and his family and friends have bought him a brand new guitar. And he says, okay, so a great guitar requires a great song, and he begins to play the Beatles song Yesterday. And they'll ask him where he learned, or when he wrote that song, and he replies, I didn't write that, Paul McCartney wrote that, the Beatles. And they just look back at him with this confused face, and he begins to realize that everyone in the world has forgotten who the Beatles are. He looks them up online. There's no reference to them. And so he kind of begins as a struggling musician that he begins to kind of write all the Beatles songs because he still remembers them, and he begins performing them as if they're his own songs. And it's in present day 2018, 2019, and so he goes on tour. He gets asked to go on tour with Ed Sheeran, and he becomes kind of one of the world's most popular artists. And he's getting everything that he ever wanted. He's getting success. People want to come see him live. He's getting all the acclaim that you would want as a musical artist. But he begins to lose kind of his best friend and eventual love interest. Her name is Ellie. And he begins to lose her because of how famous he's getting. She was kind of his manager, the friend who stuck beside him when he was playing all these clubs and festivals that no one was showing up to his shows. She was the one who was there for all that, but she begins to lose him because he's never around. He's always touring. He's always in the studio. Kind of a classic, person gets famous, they lose touch with who they were kind of story. And the film ends on this note of he ends up admitting to a huge stadium crowd that none of the songs were his, that he lists the names of the 4 Beatles and gives them credit, even though in this like new reality the Beatles really never wrote those songs. But he gives them credit, and he retires from music, and he decides to go back home and be with Ellie, which is really, he realizes like if he didn't have love, he really did have nothing. And in the end, the old Beatles maxim of all you need is love is kind of the moral of the story.